Dynasty Nerds on Better Sports Network.
Oh, it's Thursday night. You know what that means. It's the Dynasty Nerds. It's the Better Sports Network. Awesome show planned for tonight. Really, really excited. I am your host, Garret Price. I will be with you for the next 2 hours. Red Sox fan, how's it going, man? I will get to all those trade questions right around 9:45, 9:50 Eastern time. I will get to all those trade questions and walk through those. But I have an awesome show planned for tonight. We have Tom Christ at Fantasy Injury T. He is an expert when it comes to injuries. And this time of year, preseason, there's a lot of guys that we have some questions around. What's their outlook? How's it going to affect them short term, long term, all of that kind of stuff. I want to get into all those guys. We're going to focus on running backs, and then we're going to get to a lot of other positions. So really excited to talk to him and work through everything. And then, of course, around 10:15, we have our guy, Dennis Bennett, joining us like he does always. We'll talk about Dalvin. We'll talk about Zeke. We'll talk about all of the other kind of news and notes and all of those things going on right now in the NFL. Of course, there's preseason football going on right now. I've got my Brownie Elf shirt showing my fandom. Chris Tillman looking pretty good right now for my Browns as well. So pretty excited about that. So we're going to talk all things fantasy football, all things NFL football, but let's not waste any more time. Sedated Fork, how's it going, man? That's right. It is Thursday night, the best night of the week, if I do say so myself. So let's bring in Tom right now, and let's get right into all the fantasy news. Tom, how's it going, man?
I'm good, Garrett. Thanks for having me on. How you doing?
I'm doing well. This is Tom Christ. You can find him on Twitter at Fantasy Injury T. And we've got lots of injury news, or at least speculation of injuries and things like that. And probably none bigger than all of the stuff around the running back position. Now, I'm going to show my bias right away. One of my favorite running backs since he's come into the league has been Javonte Williams. I absolutely love this kid. I love the way that he plays. I loved him coming out of college, still love him to this day. But it was a pretty brutal injury that he sustained last year. And there was a lot of speculation early that he wouldn't be ready to go for the season. But now it's looking like he might be ready to go. So give me your thoughts on Javonte Williams and what we should be expecting from him. And is he a little bit of an outlier?
Yeah. Oh, a big outlier. This is a brutal injury. Make no mistake. The ACL with the posterior lateral corner. Basically, whenever you hear all these other tissues involved in addition to an ACL, it slows down the timeline of rehab pretty considerably, especially in the beginning phases. So with this type of injury, he likely was very limited in how much range of motion he's allowed to go through in the first several weeks, not weight bearing, things like that. So that leaves people prone to developing excess scarring and stiffness in the knee, which we saw J.K. Dobbins dealt with last season. Similar, but not the exact same injury, but similar. But all reports are that that's not an issue with Javonte, and that his rehab has been astronomical this far. And that's really the right word for it, because the fact that he was never on PUP from this significant injury is just outrageous. Now, when it comes to ACL rehab, there's a number of factors that can help influence if a player is going to be ready to go from the start of the next season. And he's got a couple of those in his favor. One was that he was super young at the time of injury, I think 22 years at the time. Two is the time of the injury, or really the time of the surgery in relation to week 1 of the following season. So he was injured in week 4. So that's a lot of time to rehab.
Right.
What he didn't have going in his favor is all the involvement of that tissue. But the fact that we are seeing him practicing in full and the videos that we've seen have looked pretty good, that's really promising. Now, the history will tell you that running backs do not play well first year after an ACL injury. And in fact, since 2017, in the first year after an ACL tear, running backs averaged 35% less points per game in that first year back than they did pre-injury. 35% decline in their points per game production. That starts to pick up in year 2, where it's only about 15% less than pre-injury. And in year 2, we actually see players meeting or exceeding their pre-injury points per game, whereas in year 1, Adrian Peterson, Jamal Charles, that's it. So a lot to break down there. I think I'm personally in redraft. I'm not targeting him unless he really falls to like late 6, 7. In Dynasty, I think you can expect production from him in the second half of the season. The first half probably going to be a little slow, but similar to how we saw Dobbins really kind of get his groove going the second half of the season, I think that's reasonable to expect from Javonte.
Well, that's good news. I'm thrilled that he was going to be available for me early on in the season. That he didn't go on the pup was so exciting. Now you've mentioned J.K. Dobbins a couple times. Let's touch on him. Now we know that he was injured the season before. Lots of comps to the injuries, and we saw good things out of Dobbins, but that was after he needed the extra surgery to get things cleaned up, or I guess cleanup procedure would be the better term for that. But when he came back, he put up numbers over 5 yards a carry. We were seeing some big gains, but you could watch him run and you would see that he's still not 100%. His gait looked a little funny. He didn't quite have the same burst. So still putting up productive numbers, but just maybe not to the extent that he could have. What should we expect from J.K. Dobbins this coming season?
Yeah, I'm a lot more bullish on JK this year. I mentioned the stat earlier. Second year back from ACL, running backs production really picks up a lot. And this really is a 1 to 1.5 year recovery to get back to that elite level of athleticism that you were at. So with that, I mean, some of the challenges that players have at the end stages of rehab is the agility, the stop go, and we know running backs need to cut on a dime more than other positions. Like a receiver, it's a more predicted route that they're going to run, whereas running backs, they're really reacting to the defense at all times. So I feel that's why running backs struggle the most from this injury. But a whole nother year to rehab, his power, his elusiveness, agility, top end speed, that's several more months to train all of those. So I'm feeling pretty good about JK this year, and I mean, from a redraft standpoint, I love him as my RB2 from a dynasty standpoint as well. And as far as like long term goes, like I think he's got a good shot to have 3, 4, 5 more productive seasons in this league.
Well, I love hearing that. That's another guy that I tend to have a lot of shares of. I started with the guys that I love the most because I want to hear about them. My bias is showing a little bit. But let's get into some other names where another guy that was coming off an ACL injury. Just recently, we've seen him, some of the videos and things like that of him playing again. Breece Hall. Now, we also have the speculation of why did they bring Dalvin Cook in? Like, is there more there? But we've seen him running a little bit. We've seen him on the field. So there's a lot to break down there. But are we right to be cautious with Breece Hall, or should we be expecting even better things than Javonte with the injury not being maybe as serious as it was for him?
I think both of those. I mean, the history is the history. Running backs unless your name's Adrian Peterson and Jamal Charles, you don't produce at the same level in the first year back as you did the first year. But, anybody has the potential to be an outlier. Breece Hall certainly looked like he had that potential. I mean, freak athlete out of college. Very young. ACL had some meniscus, but it doesn't sound like the meniscus was repaired. So on that faster track of rehab. So he definitely has the profile to be that guy to exceed or to meet or exceed his pre-injury production. But now you bring in Dalvin Cook and you pay him a lot of money, and they don't pay him, was it $8.6 million for nothing? Right. I think it's a combo of them not knowing if they can trust Breece in the first quarter or so of the season. And also they're making a run for the Super Bowl. There's no question about that. And they understand that running backs get injured in this league. So I think they want to have as much depth there as possible. And we know that injury rates when you come back from ACL, even if it's not an ACL re-tear, things like hamstring strains, calf strains, those are higher. So I think they're not banking on a full production season from Breece Hall / they want to be able to spell him to make sure he doesn't take too much of a beating as he's coming back. So I think that's going to definitely hit into Breece Hall's production. I think we'll see him have splash games where he goes for 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, but I think Dalvin Cook's going to also have his games.
Now, let's live in a world of hypotheticals. If Dalvin Cook hadn't been brought in, would you still be skeptical of Breece Hall this year anyway, or would you have still been fairly bullish on him despite the ACL injury?
I would have been skeptical in the
Okay.
first quarter, third of the season. I think he would have been a strong candidate to finish really strong down the end of the season.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. Let's go to Jonathan Taylor. So Jonathan Taylor is a really interesting case because there's only so much information we're getting, but we know he missed a lot of time last year, chunks of the season, 2 games here, 3 games there. And now we're getting the reports that he's missing time because of the foot injury. And then there's like the personal matters, but we know that overarching on top of all of this is the contract situation. So how much of this do you really believe is his recovery from the ankle? And how much of this is just playing hardball?
I'm pretty darn concerned with that ankle.
Okay.
Without having insider information, here's why. So high ankle sprain in week 4, I believe, missed 2 games, re-aggravated it, same injury, missed another game. Later in the season, same injury again, missed 3 games. High ankle sprains are nagging like that. That's what they often do. They often don't heal properly, and the reason is, to understand the anatomy, you have the 2 bones in the shin, the tibia and the fibula. They're held together by the strong connective tissue. With the high ankle sprain, that tissue is getting torn to some degree, depending on how severe the sprain is, and those bones now move apart from each other. They don't always move back together. I mean, that's why we hear this tightrope procedure. That's what it does. It forces those bones together so that they can heal and be nice and stable. If you remember last year when Mac Jones was dealing with this injury, one of the reports was he doesn't have stability in that ankle. So that's when these bones are not together, not congruent. It's like you're stepping in sand. Like there's not the stability to push off of. So we do know that Jonathan Taylor had surgery in January, but it wasn't a tightrope surgery. It was a debridement or a clean out procedure. So they don't tell us what they're cleaning out, but it's likely cartilage and like little frayed parts of ligament and other tissues. So that's not helping make it more stable. So if all of that was its own and we weren't hearing anything about it this year, I would have no problem. I would have no problem at all. But the fact that we're still hearing about it 6-7 months later, that's to me a huge red flag. I'm personally avoiding him in I don't have him in any of my dynasty leagues. If I did, I'd be looking to sell him, and I am not drafting him in redraft.
Wow. And this is a player that we were talking about as the number 1 overall running back just 2 seasons ago. And things looked promising potentially with Anthony Richardson. So that I'm glad you told me all this, because I'm a little scared, because I was thinking this was a good buy opportunity. But if this is something that we think could be nagging, and that, just for clarification's sake, that is basically what you're saying, is you're not sure that this is going to go away.
I've consulted with NFL players who had an ankle sprain from like 3 years ago, and he was like, "Yeah, it still bothers me."
Oh, wow.
That's not going to be the case every time.
Sure.
A lot of times they will totally get over it, but the fact that we're still hearing about it 6-7 months later, that has me concerned.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to Kendre Miller. Kendre Miller was a bit of a sleeper for people this year, especially with Alvin Kamara maybe missing some time. But we know that he had an issue with his knee. Sounds like he was present for practice today. But what are your thoughts on him? Do you think he's going to be ready to go early on? Is it something you're trusting, or does it just seem more like a fluke?
It sounds like it's going to be all systems go by week 1. I mean, he was back to practicing today. He's still got, 2-3 weeks before the season starts. His surgery over the offseason, we know the MCL was repaired. We're a little unsure what was going on with the meniscus. If that was repaired, that may have explained why things were a little delayed in mini camps and OTAs. But regardless, we saw him practicing in full and looking really good in camp. And this sounds like it's just a little minor thing, which when you just had surgery, we don't like to hear that. It's not great, but I'm not counting him out based off this. I actually love him in Dynasty. I am targeting him everywhere. And I don't mind him in redraft either. I mean, they have 2 somewhat older backs, but still really good and productive ahead of him. But this is a team, and I know it was a different coaching staff, that we've seen utilize 3 backs before. I mean, remember when Alvin Kamara's rookie season, there's Mark Ingram, Adrian Peterson ahead of him. And especially with Kamara missing 3 games in the start of the season, that's going to give Kendre opportunity to show what he's got in the first 3 weeks. And if he produces, they're going to find a way to keep him on the field.
Yeah, he's a really interesting name because you're right. He has opportunity, which not all rookie running backs have paths to opportunity. Now, will he seize it? Will he capitalize it? That's what we got to wait and see. So hopefully for his sake, he's healthy and he's good to go, and that's not a concern moving forward for him. Let's move over to the Seattle Seahawks and Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker was banged up a decent amount last year, especially coming into the season. Seems to be banged up again this year. What are your thoughts and feelings on what's going on with Kenneth Walker?
So if we go back to last season, the hernia is an interesting injury. So a lot of times that'll happen with weightlifters from just overstraining, and generally the surgeries do pretty well. Like I can get over the fact that he had that last season. The groin injury this year has potential to be a bad injury. So we often hear about sports hernias. That's when it's not only the groin, but it's actually an abdominal injury. And sometimes what happens, since the groin muscles and the abdominal muscles attached to the same bone in just about the same spot, is sometimes when you have a major groin injury, you can pull that bone, which can then tear the abdominal muscles. That's trouble. That's not what happened with him, though. It's purely a groin injury. And these actually do pretty well. Sure, the recurrence rate is in the medical literature, 18%. Not great, but guess what? Every running back is going to get hit a ton, so they're all prone to injuries. Sure. And running backs really don't average missing that much time from this. Of course, that depends on the spectrum of severity, but overall, since 2017, they average missing 1.9 games, and we really see not much decline in their fantasy production when they return. So, yeah, a little bit of an elevated injury risk, but not enough to scare me off. And I don't think this is going to hinder his production this season.
Okay. All right. Good to know. All right. I want to kind of pull back a little bit and more of the theory around this, because this is something that I've heard both sides of the coin. I've heard people talk about players that are, really injury prone. And then I've heard people say that being injury prone is a myth. And, running backs tend to be the poster child for this more than any other position. We've got studs like Saquon and Christian McCaffrey that it seemed like year after year after year we were dealing with injuries. Now, finally, last year, both of them were good to go basically the entire season. Yes, they were still dealing with some things. And, we saw Christian McCaffrey getting the electroshock therapy and stuff like that. So they were still dealing with stuff, but enough that they were able to play through. How much is injury prone really a thing? How much should that be a concern for us? Thinking more dynasty perspective of, do I want to trade for a guy like this? Do I want him on my team, or should I steer clear from some of these players?
You can see me smiling. I'm so happy you're asking me this, because about a month or two ago, I did a whole medical lit search on this, and I wrote a very detailed article with in-text citations that you can find on the fantasyinjuryteam.com. And here's what I found. Every single medical study, systematic review, journal review, whatever, on this topic has 2 things that are like the highest of the hierarchy of, we're not going to call it predicting injuries. We don't do that, but risk factors for injuries.
Okay.
So the 2 biggest ones are age and prior injury. That should sound so obvious, but there's a whole lot of medical literature supporting that. Now, age is a little bit gray. We know that at 25, biologically things start to slow down, but that doesn't mean that that's when the injury risk necessarily increases. That just means things are starting to slow down for really more from like a healing standpoint, but that's not really going to affect them till a little bit closer to 30. So let's, for simplicity's sake, let's just say 30 is the cutoff, but kind of give or take a little to where we really see injury rates increase. Now, prior injury is the other one, and that there's a lot of good sources out there that have players' injury profiles, and anytime you start seeing that really get lengthy is a time for concern. Other things they talk about are intrinsic and extrinsic factors. So intrinsic would be anything within the person themselves. So that will be, again, age and prior injury fall into there, but also range of motion at particular joints, strength at particular joints, training habits, dietary habits, sleep habits. Some of these things we will know as fans, many of these we will not. Extrinsic factors is things outside of the person, so that'll be like playing surface, time of day that you play, time of the season. So right now is when we see the highest rates of injuries, the beginning of the season, preseason, first couple weeks. So let's circle back to some of these intrinsic factors, some things like range of motion, strength. Those we're not going to know, but we can have insight to based off of their prior injuries. So things like ankle surgeries, I don't like them. Unless it was the tightrope, that's actually one that's okay. But anytime there's plates, screws, things like that in the foot or ankle, very, very hard to ever fully regain motion. Younger players have an advantage. Again, age with healing is massive. But if you start seeing players 29, 30 years old having screws and hardware put into their foot and ankle, a lot harder for them to ever fully regain the motion in the ankle. And we know that the ankles are primary shock absorber. So if we don't have full motion there, more force is going to go through the knee, the hip, the back, which can over time lead to injury. So what fantasy players need to understand, especially from a dynasty standpoint, really just focus on the big two. Age, don't go trading for players 28 or older unless you're trying to win now, and prior injury. And there's a lot of sources out there, Player Profiler, Draft Sharks, that have players' injury lists on there. And on my website, I don't have it like categorized like that, but on these articles I'm putting out now, running back, receiver previews, I've got that for each player there. So you can check out fantasyinjuryteam.com as well.
Now, with these previous injury history, I'm assuming not all injuries are created equal. There's some that are like, yeah, he was injured with that, but that's more of a freak thing. Like, it's not really going to contribute to his long-term outlook. How do we know which ones to be more worried about than others?
Well, for one, you follow me on Twitter.
There you go.
Fantasy Injury T. Upper body stuff, generally not concerned. Unless it's a dislocation and they don't get surgery for. So Dalvin Cook over the last 2 years dislocated his shoulder multiple times, and it would pop him out for games at a time. Finally, this offseason, he had the surgery, the labrum repair, and I'm sure they did some other stuff too. Those do really well. So that shoulder is nice and stable now, not a concern anymore. With the lower body, it gets a little trickier because we run and load through our lower body constantly. Hamstrings are the biggest one. Super high recurrence rate, and we don't even need to look at the literature to know that. We just need to be football fans and see that players are constantly getting hamstring injury after hamstring injury. Ankle sprains are the next one, super common to recur. Really, any kind of soft tissue injury has the potential to be an issue, but those are the two big ones. Now, ankle sprains are a little easier to play through because they can tape it up, brace it up, and they can, if it's not super severe, they can still get out there. Hamstring injuries are pretty darn concerning, though. It's a super hard injury to offload because when we walk, our hamstring is pulling on the injured part, and it's kind of hard to gauge readiness to return to play. So like Keenan Allen last year, we thought he was ready to go after missing 4 or 5 games with the hamstring injury, and then a couple plays in, re-injures it. Those would be the two to look out for. But and aside from that, that's where, some of the medical people in the fantasy world, we have a keen ability to kind of read between the lines of what the beat reporters are saying and to analyze the videos to see like, Kadarius Toney this time last season, hamstring injury, and then he returned to practice, and they posted a video of him running around in the end zone, and it looked awful. And guess what happened? He kept getting injured. So to summarize, hamstrings, ankle sprains, those are the two big ones, but any kind of lower body injury has the potential to be a problem.
Makes sense. Now, so let's go back to talking about Saquon and Christian McCaffrey. From your experience, are those guys, even though they just played a full season, they are getting a little bit older especially at the running back position. Are those guys that you would tend to stay away from with their injury history, or are they just such good producers and they're coming off a healthy year that you're not as concerned anymore?
It's always weighing pros and cons, right? Risk versus benefit. McCaffrey specifically, most of his injuries were very distinct. Like his ankle stuff, different sides. It wasn't like a recurrence of the same injury. He had a big shoulder injury as well. So with him, you could argue that they were all separate and not potentially gonna influence things in the future. But like I said, any kind of major ankle injury will give me some hesitation. But all indications are that he's a super hard worker, and we know that those injuries were when he was really young. So better probability of them not popping back up. Saquon, ACLs are generally, it's a mechanism that's going to injure anyone's ACL usually. And then I believe he had a high ankle sprain the year following. So again, those are two that we don't love to see on the resume. But the fact that he held up pretty well last season with a really heavy workload helped me be confident that he's over those. But again, anytime a player is getting the workload that he's getting, there's definitely concern. And then you just got to weigh the risk versus benefit. Now, to me, the risk is not high enough to outweigh that benefit on Saquon.
Perfect. That's what I needed to know. I appreciate that. All right, so we've touched a lot on the running back position, and that's partly because we have a lot of injuries in that realm, and a lot tend to crop up. But we have other players in the league that are injured. So what other players right now are you looking at? Are you following? And you're saying, I want to keep an eye on this because this is interesting.
Yeah, so some that I'm concerned with are Kadarius Toney. I'm not touching him anywhere. If I had him in any dynasty leagues, I wouldn't trade him for a fourth, probably not a third, because he is so talented. But I would try to get him for some kind of asset. But this guy has missed 19 games in 2 NFL seasons, and a lot of them are these injuries that have high recurrence rates. Ankle sprains, 2 of them. Hamstring injuries, 3 of them. Meniscus or some kind of knee scope cleanup. He's had multiple at this point already. It just seems like this guy is having such a hard time staying on the field, and I really feel for him because I absolutely enjoy watching him play.
Yeah.
Other than when he's returning punts and scoring touchdowns against my Eagles in the Super Bowl. But still, like, he's such a joy to watch, and I feel for him. I don't trust him to ever stay on the field. So I would very much try to offload him in Dynasty, and I would not be targeting him in redraft. That's
real quick before you get to the next one. We have a good question here. Sedated Fork asks, will the groin injuries, will that affect a player's home run potential?
Not as much as you would think. So on the surface, you would think so because it's a leg injury, but and the groin muscles do have some involvement in what's called hip flexion and extension, or the leg going forward and back, but they're not the primary drivers for top end speed. That's more the glutes, the hamstrings, and the calves, and the hip flexors to some degree. So no, I don't think that's going to affect his home run potential.
Cool. All right. Wanted to get that one in. Go ahead. Keep telling us about other players that we need to be keeping an eye on, or that you're keeping an eye on, that you're maybe a little worried about.
Yeah, so Rashad Bateman's another one, and I don't know that worried is the right word, particularly because he's so young. So for Dynasty, there's a lot of years ahead of him, and for redraft, he's not going that high. Like, he's not a big risk. Right. I'm seeing him going in like around 10 and 11, which you're taking shots at that point, and we know that he's got big play potential, that he's a really, really talented player. But that injury, that Liz Frank injury, he had surgery in early November. Typical timeline for full go is like 6 months, which was a few months ago. And we just came off PUP like last week, I believe. And he's looked good. The videos I've seen look really good. He looks like he's cutting hard through that ankle, no hesitation, agility's good, all that. The issue is that, to me, is that we know that there was some irritation, inflammation back in, I believe it was June, that he needed the injection for. That was all over the news and Twitter and all that, because that is not a traditional part of the rehab process. That tells us that there's inflammation in there that was bothering him to the point where they needed to do that, and that they couldn't get it down, the inflammation down, by other means. So I'm being cautious on him at the moment, because inflammatory stuff typically will prop up with overuse. So I wouldn't necessarily expect him to have issues in this first week of practice. This is something that could possibly come back week 2, week 5, week 8. If he gets to week 8 and he's okay, I'm not concerned anymore. But
Okay.
earlier in the season, I still have a level of concern. So I'm really, really closely monitoring him in practice up these next couple weeks before I have all my redrafts. In Dynasty, I don't think I'm concerned long term. With the Liz Frank injury, we typically see it be detrimental for older players. Alshon Jeffrey, Antonio Holmes are a couple that come to mind. But we just saw Travis Etienne look really good in the first year back from this. So I'm absolutely not out on Bateman Dynasty. I'm just cautious on him for this year. And if he gets through like half the season and is doing fine, then I'm not that concerned anymore.
Good. Yeah. He's another one that, you see his potential, and he's had games where he's flashed and looked awesome. But then it just seems like he's been really unlucky, just thing after thing after thing. Poor guy can't seem to stay on the field. Who else are you keeping an eye on?
Jameson Williams is one that I've seen so many people jump ship on him, and it's not fair. We have not gotten an accurate sample of him. He had his ACL injury in January during, I believe it was the national championship game.
Yeah.
And then he gets drafted to a very much rebuilding Detroit Lions team that knew that they were not competing last season. All they were trying to do is grow as a team, which they did, and I'm so excited to watch them this season. So they did the right thing by not rushing him back. I don't remember what week he finally played, but it was like way into the season. And
yeah, 12, 13. It was a while.
Something like that. And even then, he never had more than a 25% snap rate. And I think they did that on purpose. And I think people are missing that they did that on purpose. And he showed flashes of his speed. There's a couple plays where he got behind the defense that he scored like a 40-yard touchdown. And I want to say he was deep on another that Goff missed him, and then he had that 40-something yard end around. And we've seen videos in camp of him getting behind the defense. There's a lot of rumors that he can't catch the ball, but you know what? They're saying that about Ja'Marr Chase too. That worked out pretty well.
It did.
This hamstring injury is not great. We don't like that. We just talked about hamstring injuries, but guess what? He's got till week 7 to get it right. So they aren't going to rush him back because they can't rush him back. So I'm so bullish on Jameson. I'm getting him. I have him in all my dynasty leagues. I drafted him when he was a rookie, and I'm targeting him in round 9, 10 in every redraft league.
Yeah, he definitely has that home run potential. If you're in best ball and things like that, and this causes his stock to drop. Well, what really changed that much? Nothing's really changed. He's still going to be out 6 games either way. So I don't think that there's anything that's really changed a lot.
Yeah. I think people would hate me if we didn't talk about Cooper Kupp because he's just.
Please do.
I love him. He's so great. This hamstring injury after the ankle injury last season, people are making a big deal about it, as they should. Hamstrings are not great, but we're seeing these videos of him ramping up his running velocity already, and he looks good. The running gait looks great. I saw a video either yesterday or the day before where he was pretty darn close to 100% speed. And what we know about Cooper Kupp is, one, he plays for the Rams. The Rams have pretty well known to have like the best medical staff in all of football. And I had Stefania Bell on my show recently, and obviously she has the inside scoop with a lot of these training staffs. And they said that they have never seen a harder worker in their life during rehab than when Cooper Kupp was rehabbing his ACL. Like an absolute machine with rehabbing. So that tells me that, one, he's so dedicated to getting back on the field. 2, he's in the best hands of medical professionals that any receiver in this league will have. And 3, they're going to gauge things properly with him. The high ankle sprain, not so much of a concern. I understand, 29, now 30 years old, but he was likely ready to play if the Rams were making a run last year. They just weren't. Sure. So it was like, why the heck would we bring him back? But again, he had the tightrope surgery, which does a lot better than any surgeries that have screws or plates in them. So, and then the other knock on him, 30 years old. Well, receivers have produced at that age, and Cooper Kupp has the clearest path to a massive target share. The question mark to me is Matthew Stafford. Can he stay on the field? He's got a long list of injuries, but really hasn't missed that much time until recently. But last season, the concussion and spinal cord contusion, I don't love that being on someone's resume. One of my good friends and colleagues is a neuro PT specialist, so he works with concussions. Like, that's his jam. And I asked him about Matthew Stafford, like, should we be concerned? He's like, yeah, you kind of should. Like, that spinal cord contusion is fine now, but the nervous system doesn't forget. So you've probably heard that when a player has a concussion, they're more susceptible to another, and that it usually lingers longer. That's going to apply for a nerve injury as well. So I'm not saying that that's likely to happen, but if Stafford gets hit the right way, which with a bad offensive line is certainly possible, that he could have some problems, and he's at an age where who knows if he even wants to play that much anymore.
Right.
So I'm not super concerned about Cooper Kupp himself. And by the way, I'm not wishing that on Matthew Stafford. I hope he stays healthy. I'm not that concerned about Cooper Kupp. It's more who's throwing to Cooper Kupp. So you kind of got to make your own decision there.
Yeah. So as far as Cooper Kupp goes, now I haven't heard. Is it looking like he will be ready to go by week 1?
Oh, yeah.
Or
the videos that I saw this week, he's definitely trending to be ready week 1.
Good. Great to hear. Give us the last couple rapid fire guys that just thumbs up, thumbs down. I feel good about this guy. I'm worried about this guy. The last few that you got on your list.
Yeah, major thumbs up for Tony Pollard coming off the fibula fracture, high ankle sprain with the tightrope. He looks amazing in camp. He has a path to being the RB1 this season. Mm-hmm. Rashad Penny is interesting because he has missed 38 games in 5 seasons and multiple games in each season. That's not good, but he finds himself in a nice situation with the best offensive line in the game and probably one of the better offenses in the game. And obviously there's a crowded backfield, but he's the perfect back for that offense, in my opinion. It's just a matter of will he stay on the field, which to this point in his career, he has not been able to do. So I don't trust him across a whole season, but he's a guy that you can have in spurts. And maybe that spurt is the end of the season in the championships. Who knows? Other guy I'll hit on, Joe Burrow. The videos the other day of him throwing in warmups looked really good, really, really promising. We saw him really loading through that calf and then exploding through that calf during the throw. I think people forget with quarterbacks, the throwing arm leg. So a right-handed quarterback, the right leg, that's where they generate almost all their power to throw off of. So we need to be mindful of that when quarterbacks have unless it's Tua, who's a lefty, if quarterbacks have a right foot or leg injury, we need to consider that not just affecting their mobility in the pocket, but also their deep ball. So the fact that I was seeing Burrow throw 30, 40 yards with no mechanical flaw at all and did not appear to be in any pain with several more weeks till week 1, that's really, really positive. I think he's going to be ready to go. Slightly elevated re-injury risk, of course, like any lower body muscle injury. Kyler Murray, I am concerned for the first half of the season.
Okay.
He's still not practicing. The video or the picture of him a week or so ago, you could see that quad was not quite as big, the injured one. And I don't think Arizona's really motivated to rush him back. They know they're not playing for anything. And again, right leg, right-handed quarterback, running quarterback. So Dynasty outlook, just fine. Do not be worried about him long-term. But for this season, if you're drafting him in redraft, you better have somebody else to play the first half of the season.
Perfect. Last one I did want to ask you about if you weren't going to get to it. The injury scare with the calf for Aaron Rodgers. Anything to be worried about, or are we good to go on that?
No, that's old news. He's fine.
Okay. All right. Just making sure because he's a big-time player, and there's a lot of pieces in that offense that are very interesting this year. So him being hurt would mess that up quite a bit. Tom, this was an awesome segment. Genuinely appreciate you coming on. Sedated Fork said we need to get you back on because this was some good stuff. So remind everyone where they can find you, and then plug anything you're working on right now. What are you up to? What do you got planned for the season? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so Twitter at Fantasy Injury Team. You could also follow us on YouTube, Fantasy Injury Team, Instagram, Fantasy Injury Team. podcast on all platforms, Fantasy Injury Team. That's where we do most of our work. We put out a weekly episode on Thursday morning. In season, it'll be Thursday mornings where we just go through all the relevant fantasy players that have some kind of injury concern for either potentially playing in the upcoming week or like how long we expect them to be out for. Really thorough, really detailed. I break down not only their fantasy outlook, but also I explain what the injury is for the average fan to understand. So that and Twitter is where we do a lot of our work, and we're writing articles on fantasyinjuryteam.com every week. Right now, I'm putting out a series by position. So I've put out quarterback, tight end, and receivers who have are either coming off a major injury or have like an injury past, and I'm working on the running back one that'll be out next week.
Awesome. Well, Tom, thank you so much again. Thank you for coming on. We'll absolutely get you on again, my man.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yep, we'll see you. All right. Well, before we go to break, thank you so much, Tom, for joining us. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that as much as I did and got as much information. There were a couple things where I was already leaning one way and he kind of helped bring me back to center. So really appreciate his insight on what's going on in the world of injuries. Want to touch on what's going on with the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription. Look, the season is right around the corner. Teams are drafting. People are drafting now. This is the main time of year where we see a lot of the drafts. You want to get this All-Pro subscription. Plus, you get the Fantasy Football Draft Guide and Cheat Sheet. You can start a 7-day free trial of Fantasy Alarm's All-Pro subscription and get the Fantasy Football Draft Guide and Cheat Sheet absolutely free. Go to fantasyalarm.com/draft. That's fantasyalarm.com/draft. All right. This is the time of the show. If you've been watching for a while, you know how this works. We're going to take a commercial break, but when we come back, this is the time that we get into all of the questions, whether they're draft questions, trade questions. I think somebody even put a game theory question in there. All about that. If you watch the new show with Jared Wackerly or listen to it, that's what that show's about. Talking Dynasty. It's all about theory, how we get better at playing the game of football, not just necessarily what players we like, what players we don't. So get all of those questions in now. We'll answer those when we come back from break. We'll see you in a moment.
I feel like this is a quietly contentious point in Dynasty fantasy football, what it means to actually be rebuilding. Some people say you should never truly be rebuilding. How do you view the rebuilding versus competing dichotomy in Dynasty?
So I will be the first person to acknowledge that my preferred format of fantasy football is just redraft. The years that I have played Dynasty, it has been I've drafted a win now team because I've seen people that have just gotten into the cycle of rebuilding and thus they just don't make any progress. So if you're rebuilding for the 5th year in a row, I just, I don't know exactly how you get out of it, but yeah, it's definitely something that can happen. And a lot of people, especially when we come out of the NFL draft, everyone's just instantly shipping off, draft picks and everything. So, I mean, it's definitely something that can happen.
Joey, do you feel similarly to it? Do you feel like you see people getting stuck in the rebuilding loop?
I mean, I would say people that try to rebuild in the beginning of seasons, of their fantasy seasons, I see them get stuck in that rut. I would really try to only ever rebuild if I knew I was going to miss the playoffs. Like, I'm always trying to play to win, even if it's maybe I don't know.
I think my big thing is the word rebuild is a much shorter time frame than I think most people say it should be. Like, they look at rebuild as like 3 years out competing. Rebuild, you're looking to compete next season. You know what I mean? Like, if you're doing it now, you're looking to revamp, and maybe there's a one season where you ship it off, but that very next season you should be competing. If you're doing it like that, I'm cool with it, but you got to have a plan, not just keep getting the young players, keep getting the draft picks. Otherwise, you end up like Tim. Maybe not like Tim who gets a bye, but you make the playoffs, you're in that like 4 to 6 range every year, just hovering in the middle. Nothing ever gets better, nothing ever gets worse.
I think I play like you in Dynasty, Simon. I play in 3-year windows.
100%. That's my go-to. And with the rate at which Dynasty leagues turn over, you should really only ever play in a 3-year window.
Welcome back in. It's Thursday night. It's Dynasty Nerds Night. I'm your host, Garret Price. Thanks again to Tom for joining us, talking all things injuries. Great segment. If you missed that, you're definitely going to want to go back and watch it. Lots of information in a short time frame on what we should be doing with these injured players. Really appreciate his time. And you know what? What better time to do this read than right now when I'm talking about going back, where you can watch the show and all of our stuff. Join all of our live talk shows on the Better Sports Network YouTube channel. So if you're not on the YouTube channel, make sure to get to the YouTube channel. You can call in or live chat with our hosts and community. And that's something that once we moved away from the app, I didn't realize that we could still do call-ins. I thought call-ins were dead once we left the app. That is not true. We can still do call-ins. So there might be times where it would be great to get you guys come in, talk about your teams, all that kind of stuff. All of that to be said, you can watch all of our shows and see all of our clips, our best moments, interviews on YouTube, Twitter, and at bettersports.com. Heavy T said, nope, very much alive still, LOL. See, shows how much I know. I need to pay better attention, clearly. I really did. I thought, well, now that we're not doing the app, people can't call in. Nope, can still call in. All right, let's get to some of these trades, some of these questions, all of that kind of stuff. Red Sox fan for life 13 says, got Dobbins a 25 second and third for Kendre Miller and my 24 projected late first. How did I do? Overall, I really like that deal. Now, do I ever want to give a first up? No, I don't love giving first up, especially 24 is looking pretty good, but it's looking pretty good right now at the top. We really don't know how the second half is going to look. And those second half are at best 50-50 shots on hitting on those players at the back end of the first round. So I really like that move. Really, I'm not the biggest Kendre Miller guy. I know other people really love Kendre Miller. Watching his tape, I was underwhelmed. I don't want to say underwhelmed. That's not fair. I think he was a solid player, but he's not a game changer. J.K. Dobbins is a game changer. And when you have the opportunity to acquire one, and you got some stuff back. I know seconds and thirds aren't super exciting, but those are pieces that you can use in other deals. So I am all about that. I think J.K. Dobbins could be a league winner this year. I think he could absolutely jump into the RB1, like top 12 category. And like, I'm probably going to have a hot take on him when it gets to our hot take show, because I really like J.K. Dobbins. And I think if they give him the workload and even just gets a little bit of passing work, it could be really, really good for my man, J.K. Dobbins. All right. So Data Fork says, have a game theory question. I love game theory questions. Have a game theory question for you. When do you try to trade for a stack? Did it recently where I'm a contender, but there is one clear top team. Bet on a stack as the only way to win against the best team. So here's my thoughts on stacks. Overall, if I have the opportunity, and make sure, maybe I should clarify what we mean by a stack. What we mean by a stack is where you get a quarterback and then you get one of his main pass catching options as well. So elite ones are like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson. Like, where it's a really good quarterback, a really good wide receiver. Do you try to stack that position, get both? Because then when you get a touchdown, it kind of doubles up in a way. Now, I don't like to go out of my way to get a stack, whether it's in a draft or a trade. So I don't want to like way overpay. I don't want to overdraft a player just to complete the stack, because at the end of the day, the best players are who I want. But I'm with you on the game theory aspect of this, where, look, you're a contending team, but there's one team that's just better. That's just better. And if I have to go toe-to-toe against them, I'm going to need that big week to win. And that's where you see those stacks really come into play, because if a quarterback has a 4-touchdown game, chances are at least one, if not two of those touchdowns were to his main option. So if it's Pat Mahomes, there's a good chance if Pat Mahomes throws 4 touchdowns, Travis Kelce is heavily involved both in catching touchdowns and yards. You know, if Josh Allen has a 5-touchdown game. Stephon Diggs probably had a pretty good day. So that's why that theory or that concept has gotten really big. Now it's a little bit bigger in the redraft, best ball type of realm, because in Dynasty, so much changes so quickly that to try to force it isn't worthwhile typically. But if it falls in line and you don't have to overpay to make it happen, especially if you have a team that you need that little extra boost to try to beat them, no issue with that at all. All right, Stephen F says, Superflex tight end premium. Would you trade 1-6 and 1-10 to get 102? My current quarterbacks are Lance, Purdy, and Burrow. So that means you basically have one legitimate starting quarterback, and then you have an upside at QB2, but you don't have anything that you're overly excited about. Because even if, right now I'm pretty bullish on Purdy's going to be the guy. He's going to be the starter for at least the beginning of the year, and we'll see how everything plays out. But I think that they're going to stick with Purdy for now. But if I'm in a dynasty league, I need at least 3 quarterbacks that are going to be playing. And right now you only have 2. So when we look at 102, that's Anthony Richardson. He's got crazy, crazy potential. What are you giving up to get him? Okay, at 1-6, that's probably Jackson Smith and Jigba that you're giving up at 1-6. And then at 110, you're looking at a Zay Flowers, a Jonathan Mingo, Quentin Johnston. Like those are the kind of players that you're looking at in the 110 range more often than not. Maybe a Devon A-Chain. But those are the players that you're looking at in that range. I'm absolutely willing to give up Zay Flowers and JSN as good as those players are, and I think both of them could be very good pros. Those were my top 2 wide receivers in this class. But in a super flex league, if Anthony Richardson even just sort of hits, you're going to be able to get JSN, Zay Flowers, and a first plus on top of it easily, even if those guys do well. So quarterback is just so like I'm doing a Devy, and it's a full startup, so NFL, but Devy league startup as well right now. First 8 players taken, all quarterbacks. Then in the second round, we're already even going into like next year's quarterbacks, the 24 class, because it's Devy. I think in the first, actually, what? I'll tell you exactly. Within the first 20, how many picks? So we're on pick 210 now. So we're about to hit our 20th pick. We have had almost all of those picks, with the exception of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of those picks have all been quarterbacks. So that means we have 12 quarterbacks that have gone in the first 19 picks. So that just shows you quarterbacks rule the day. They do in super flex leagues. So I would absolutely be willing to do that. Red Sox fan says, as a win now team, I traded away Bateman and got back Keenan Allen, who will now be my wide receiver 4 or 5. Great move as a contender. Because Keenan Allen for now is still getting the targets. Bateman isn't. They both have had injury worries, but overall, I would absolutely take Keenan Allen all day, especially if he's your wide receiver 4 or 5. He's good enough to be your wide receiver 2. So if you have him that deep, you're putting him in the flex. He's just filling in on bye weeks. That's a great move. Love it. So Dave Fork says, by the way, the stack trade that I made was to trade away Burrow and James Cook for Tua, Calvin Ridley, and a 24 first. Now I have the Tua and Hill stack. That's bold. It's tough to give up Joe Burrow, but I don't hate it, especially if you think that 24 first is going to be in the top half. Then I love it, because if I have a chance to get Marvin Harrison Jr., Drake May, Caleb Williams, like if I have a chance to get those kind of guys, then it's a great deal. If it's a late first, then it's like, okay, it's fine. But I do think Tua is an undervalued player right now and a good move. Tuckleberry Finn, love that name. Dobbins and Swift for Najee on a contender. I have a hard time with this one because I do think Najee is a good contender buy, but I love J.K. Dobbins a lot, and I don't want to have to give up much on top of J.K. Dobbins in order to get myself a Najee Harris. I would say at the end of the day, I would play it safe. If I'm a contender at the end of the day, all that matters is the titles. And even though I think the Dobbins and Swift side is the slightly better side, I would probably do that so that way that helps me win a ship. If that's the piece you need. Now, if it's like, it gets me close and like maybe, then no. But if you're already, trotting out there, I got Josh Allen and Joe Burrow at quarterback, and I got Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle and, studs. You got studs everywhere else. Travis Kelce at tight end. Then, yeah, that's a piece that puts you over the top and helps you win at that position. So there we go. All right. Jake says Dynasty League with contracts. So 1 QB, half PPR, Josh Allen for 2 years or Chris Olave for 4 years. Quarterbacks are expensive, and I won't be able to retain Allen. I'm leaning Olave. Wide receivers are Olave, Higgins, London, DJ Moore, and Pickens. Yeah, I'm with you. I would probably go Olave there, partly because of the contract, partly because in a 1 QB league, as much as it still hurts to lose Josh Allen, you never want to lose a player the caliber of a Josh Allen. But even if you do, it's not that hard to get a Kirk Cousins. It's not that hard to get a Jared Goff if you have to, or even if you want to get into the Lamar, the Justin Fields range. Like, it's not too hard to be able to do that, or just find a quarterback on a 1-year contract. So I would take the Olave side of that and keep him that way. All right. Jake, Steven says, Jake, what site do you guys use to track contracts? And he says he does it on spreadsheets. So tricky. Saying I'd rather lose Josh Allen and get Olave than lose Josh Allen in 2 years because someone paid a high amount for him. I am with you, Jake, from State Farm. All right. Let's take a quick break. And when we get back, we'll finish up any other questions that you guys have. And then around 10:15, we'll get ourselves a little Dennis Bennett action here on the Dynasty Nerd Show on the Better Sports Network.
Breece Hall right now, and I've talked to plenty of high-stakes players, I'm sure you have too, Kev. Had Hall not torn his ACL last year, he might have been the 101 in drafts this year. That's how good he was looking last year, and obviously with the addition of Aaron Rodgers. At the 305, running back 11 behind Derrick Henry and Ramondre Stevenson, right ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs and Najee Harris. Your thoughts on him as a mid-third round pick? How have you been attacking him? Have you been getting him at that spot so far this year?
Yeah, if I start out with 2 wide receivers, Breece Hall is right at the top of the queue coming into the third. If I knew he'd be healthy for week 1, I was still a little.
Well, he'd be going higher than the mid third.
Right. He may go 101 or well, RB1 at least.
Yeah.
But I don't think we know that even if he's healthy in spring and the summer.
Mm-hmm.
I still like if I'm running a team, if I'm the coach, I'm bringing him back slow. Like he's on a pitch count. Like I want him for the end of the season because I got Aaron Rodgers for the playoffs, right? Like even if he's fully healthy, I would work him in slow. But that is actually what you want. Like he's still going to get the high value touches. So yeah, if we know he's healthy, he's a first rounder. So like if he's sitting there in the third, especially when I get 2 wide receivers to start, I'll take Hall all day.
Yeah, it almost makes me think that the uncertainty with Breece Hall has made him unfairly fall too far, right? Like, right. Because we're talking about the team here in June. They're still hoping that he's ready for week 1. This is not oh, we'll see what happens. Oh, we're taking it day by day. Oh, we're liking how he's coming along. No, they still think by week 1. And the fact that we have that timeline, I think, maybe bumps him up, especially as the drafting season gets deeper and deeper here in July and August. Maybe we start seeing him go up the boards as well.
Welcome back, Dynasty Nerds, Better Sports Network, Thursday night. I'm your host, Garret Price. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty Price. And I'm catching up on my Browns game because obviously we're doing the show. Not going to get the opportunity to watch it live. I'll go back and watch it later. Saw a little bit earlier with Cedric Tillman playing well. But man, Austin Watkins has been good every single game for the Browns this year. Has been absolutely nuts. Now, if you guys have been with me for a while, go back to the 21 class or it might have been the 2020 class. I was really high on Austin Watkins. In fact, I actually had him within our top 10 receivers in that draft class. He went undrafted, and I was really disappointed. I was like, man, I really like what I saw from this kid. And he got undrafted. He was with the 49ers and then broke his foot in 49ers camp. And if you're an undrafted guy and you get injured, your shot of making the team is almost zero. So, of course, he doesn't get brought on. He gets moved, doesn't really catch on with anybody, and then joins the Browns this offseason. And so far, each and every game, Austin Watkins has been going absolutely nuclear. Now, obviously, he's not playing against the best of the best competition, but man, is he putting up numbers. Right now in this game, he's got 6 receptions for 124 yards and a touchdown. He's going nuts. You look at what he's done the other games. Let's see. Yeah. And before this, he had 106 yards and a touchdown on 8 receptions. So he has been absolutely golden. Heavy T saying, finally got our Julio Jones. I'm not sure we got Julio, but dang, he has played really, really well. Excited about this wide receiver core because Amari Cooper is locked and loaded as the wide receiver 1. They brought in Elijah Moore. He's going to get a lot of PT. And then Donovan Peoples-Jones is here, and he's a really good player as well. But what we've seen from Cedric Tillman, what we're seeing from Austin Watkins, all of a sudden, this could be a really, really dynamic wide receiver room. So had to get that out there because I'm excited, and it's football related. All right. So we have Paul Vo saying Dynasty, and I am a contender. Should I trade Debo and a 24 third for a 24 first? It's projected mid and a 24 second. I have St. Brown, Keenan Allen, Terry McLaurin, and Mechie. I don't hate the value. I think you could get a little bit more for Debo. But I don't hate the value. The only thing that I'm concerned about is you might need him to win this year. Because if your wide receiver 4 is John Mechie, that's going to be an issue. Because right now we have no idea what we're getting from John Mechie. I think his ADP is like wide receiver 78 or something like that. Now, could he end up having a great year? Sure. But Debo's going to be your wide receiver 2. That makes Keenan Allen your wide receiver 3 and Terry McLaurin your wide receiver 4. And you feel really good about that wide receiver room there. So while the value isn't bad, and I do want to get into this 24 class, I just worry that you wouldn't have enough depth. Now, if you could then turn around and trade Mechie and that second and get yourself a, let's say DeAndre Hopkins. Trade Mechie in a second, get DeAndre Hopkins. Then I'm more okay with it. You got yourself the extra first. You were able to then add DeAndre Hopkins there. I'm good with that. But I just don't want you to put yourself in a spot where you were going to be a contender, but now you're not going to be a contender simply because you were trying to get value, which I don't blame. I don't blame you for trying to get some picks in this class. But that's something that I would keep in mind. All right. So Data Fork says, I am in a startup right now with 24 picks added. Is it actually time to buy Trey Lance? I just got my first share of him at 1407. It seems like he is low in value right now. So, first of all, awesome that you're in a startup right now with 24 picks. I think I'm going to have a hard time doing startups now that do not have future picks available, because I think it is a really fun way to try to capitalize on your knowledge. If you know some of the big names that are coming out, you're able to really capitalize that. So love drafts that get 24 picks added into them. Now, as far as Trey Lance goes, I've never been a Trey Lance fan. I've never been a Trey Lance supporter. We've talked about on the Nerds podcast ad nauseum on how even years ago we were out on Trey Lance. Now, we've gotten our things, our fair share of stuff incorrect, but that was definitely one of the ones where we got that right. We all had Justin Fields ahead of him. We had things in the right order. But at pick 14 in a startup, or round 14, I mean, sure. I mean, I know you want a more definitive answer, like, heck yes, that would be awesome. But it is at the point where it's kind of like, why not? After the 14th round, honestly, after the 10th round, I'm not counting on anything sticking. Anything. I'm only playing for ceiling. Oh, that's all I care about when I'm drafting after the 10th round. I do not care what their floor is. Could not care less. I'm drafting for what could their ceiling be. And even though his floor is exactly like my buddy Edward Rouse just said, XFL. Like, that is absolutely in the range of outcomes. But what also is in the range of outcomes is Geno Smith. A guy that it didn't work out the first time around, looks like a bust, gets in with the right team, works his tail off, and then gets an opportunity and does decent with it. Yeah, that's in the realm of possibility too. So if I'm drafting in a startup and I can get a quarterback in a super flex league, now that's the other part, is this has got to be a super flex league. If not, I don't care that much about the upside at quarterback because I don't really need many quarterbacks. But assuming this is a super flex league, yeah, why not? Why not just take that shot that somebody does end up, having him as part of their team, and he does a little bit, shows out, and then all of a sudden now you can turn around and sell Trey Lance for a first and a second. So yeah, why not? All right. Dollar Bill says Trey Sermon out there looking good tonight. I'm not able to watch it live right now. I forgot to bring my iPad up with me while this is going on, but it's probably for the best. I get a little distracted sometimes when that happens. I'm terrible at multitasking, but good to hear that he's looking good. But he said then he did fumble now. So yeah, you'll have that. You win some, you lose some. Jake said Jahan Dotson. I don't know if that's a reference to something that we've been discussing on the show. So let me know. Is that just something we're referencing on the show, or did he do something tonight? Because honestly, I don't even know. Are the Commanders playing tonight? They might be. I should know that. But when I knew I had the show tonight, I was like, I'll go back later and I'll watch all the games and catch up. So let me know if Jahan Dotson is doing something special, if he looks like the next Austin Watkins out there or not. So all right. Well, all of that. If you guys, I want to remind everybody, if you have not, okay, Commanders don't play till Monday. All right. Yeah. Oh, Jahan Dotson would be a good pickup for Paul. Okay. That would make sense. Somebody else to fill in that spot. Yep. I'm with you, Jake. I love Jahan Dotson. I think he's a fantastic player. If you did not catch our earlier segment with Tom Christ, you can find him. I had it here. I don't know. I lost it now. It's like fantasy injury T, I want to say. But if you did not see it, go catch that interview, because he did a great job of breaking down all of the all of the injuries, all of the potential injuries, fantasy injury T. Yep. All of the injuries, all of the things you should be watching out for, some of the telltale signs of guys that we need to move on from. Really, really, really informative session and interview there with my guy, Tom. All right, last question, and then we'll go to our final break of the night before we get Mr. Dennis Bennett in here talking all of the news and notes that are happening right now in the NFL. All right, Stephen F. says, assuming I can't get that 102 pick, my plan is to use 112 for Howell or Levis. Don't like either, to be honest, but I know I need a quarterback. My other draft picks are 101, 106, 109, 110, and 112. And yeah, Steven, I would, even if you can't get up to 102, can you get up to 103? Get Bryce Young. Can you, and I have no problem with Howell. The only issue is that team seemed primed for just a complete blow up, absolute complete blow up. So I worry about if that team does, Ron Rivera gets the old axe and he's gone. If the only contracts that are stable there are basically Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin, everybody else could be gone tomorrow. Brand new team, which means they're bringing in a brand new quarterback. So if I'm trying to get a little more stable at the position, can I use pick 106 and 112? And can I get Kirk Cousins? I know it's not sexy, but that would give you a lot more stability on a contender than hoping Howell works out. And then I just used picks to get a guy that's going to be gone any second. Jared Wackley, my homie, my guy. I mentioned the Talking Dynasty show earlier. If you have not checked that out, great episode breaking down analytics. So if you're very analytically minded, you are going to enjoy it. Random question in case there is a break, because I don't think you all have ever covered it. Do you guys have normal jobs? Are you living our dreams of doing fantasy 24/7? So at the moment, we at Dynasty Nerds are all still working other jobs. Now, there are some that are making enough to where they could live on that. But they have other good jobs, so they're not. Me currently, I am in a spot where I'm getting close to potential full-time, but we also have to make some other financial decisions, some stuff, insurance, things like that. So currently, no one is, but I would say we're on the cusp of getting to a point where we have to really start to consider, do we do this full-time? And if so, that's so much more content coming out. So that would be pretty awesome. Stephen F. said, trade away 304 or 103 and 104 to get picks that I have now. So probably cannot get those back. Makes absolute sense there. All right, let's go to our final break. But before we do, the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription plus the Fantasy Football Draft Guide and cheat sheet. Start a free 7-day trial of Fantasy Alarm's All-Pro subscription and get the Fantasy Football Draft Guide and cheat sheet absolutely free. Go to fantasyalarm.com/draft. That's fantasyalarm.com/draft. We're going to take a break. When we're back, at Culture Coach Dennis Bennett will join us to talk everything going on right now in the NFL.
What can we expect from you out there on the track tonight?
Listen, I have a wife, 2 kids. I have, full-time jobs. I'm never nervous. I don't even know what that word means. Can you explain what nervous means? No. I'm ready to have fun. I've never done anything like this before. I got asked to be a part of this. This is fascinating. Like, it's so cool to just look around and see what goes on here. So I'm just excited to get out on the horse. And you want trash talk? Is that what you're asking me for? No trash talk. I hope everyone does well.
All right. Everyone's going to do well, but it has to be a winner. So give me your trifecta. Who's going to come in first, second, and third? Heat.
I will go Maria 1, me 2, Willie 3, Moose goes 4th.
Well, it's very simple. I won this event last year. I won my heat, and so the defending champ has to be the favorite. Now, that makes me a little nervous just because I feel like it's hard to repeat. There's a little pressure when you're the favorite. But that being said, I'm still optimistic.
So your heat, it's you,
Yes.
Moose and Keith from Better Sports Network, and Willie Colon.
I think Keith might be my stiffest competition. And I asked for this because I actually recruited Keith, if you didn't know. So, Keith, if you win, you're welcome.
Malusis is very good. I mean, he knows what he's doing. But I'm going to go with Maria.
Keith is waving to the crowd. He must pay attention because they're off. It's Mark Malusis going for the lead. Maria Marino on the outside. And now Keith Irizarry on the outside with speed. And they're 3 wide into the first turn. Woo! Mark Malusis is locked in for his life. 138 and 2. They're into the stretch. Sportscasters Derby 2. And still in front, Keith Irizarry. And now Mark Malusis is trying to squeeze on through.
Come on! Back! Come on! Let's go! Come on, kick it! Kick it! Yeah!
Keith Irizarry. Keith, you did it all the way, wire to wire. Over Mark Malusis.
Awesome! That was so cool!
The champ is here! Keith, what was it like being out there? Adrenaline rush, you were doing the Instagram Live, so there was no panic. You looked cool, calm, collected the whole time, and you won it.
I felt really comfortable. I did. Like, I know you were joking with me before. Are you nervous? Are you whatever? What are you? David, the driver, was awesome. He's like, we're going to win this. I said, all right, let's win this. And he said, let's go. Yeah, I just felt really comfortable. I did. It was fun. We're in the lead. I got Maria Marino on the right side of me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to beat us, right? And then out of nowhere, you see Moose coming up this way, and we feel him breathing down our neck. And I'm like,
Moose
no,
on the loose.
Moose.
Watch out.
Moose was definitely on the loose, and we just got Moose by a neck, a nose, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but again, all of this for a great cause, and it was absolutely awesome to do this. It was cool.
All right, Keith, congratulations, and no matter what, you could always hold this over Moose's head.
Yeah!
Oh, we are back. Dynasty Nerds on the Better Sports Network. Better Boss checking in. What's up, man? Great to see you this past weekend at the Fantasy Football Expo. And you know who else I got to see at the Fantasy Football Expo? The guy sitting right here, Mr. Dennis Bennett at Culture Coach himself. Dennis, how's it going, man?
Man, I'm just sitting here reminiscing that delicious dinner we had at Shula's with the, dessert. I'm not sure what they were thinking, but
for those that are interested in what Dennis and I like to eat, Dennis and I, we're at Shula's, the Nerds team's there, even a couple other people joining us for this event, and we're eating, and we got some great food. Then we get to the dessert part, and Dennis and I both order this. It's like this Nutter Butter thing, where it's like
custard and
yeah, it's like chocolate and peanut butter, but then there's this like dome over top of it, and I think it was supposed to kind of have like a waffle consistency. I don't know.
It seemed like it was like hardened sugar, something that whatever it was. I didn't get it. And
it was not good. I just wanted ice cream. I messed up. I should have just got ice cream.
I know you guys were bragging about the ice cream company. We should have just went straight ice cream. But needless to say, we had a fantastic time. Shula's, The meal was great overall. The waitress was great. We had great company. Couple nerd herders joined us. Got to see lots of old friends while we were at the expo. Make some new friends. It was a great time.
So Dennis, real quick, because I don't think they want to hear us wax poetic about the expo that they did not get to go to. But one highlight. What was one highlight for you that you are going to remember from this year's expo?
So, I know that Dynasty Nerds are kind of a big deal. We've got a pretty solid presence in fantasy football, and and especially in the dynasty area of fantasy football. And you've met some people. You've had some great guests on your shows. And one guy I wanted to meet, I walked up to, and I'm like, "Hi, Derek. I'm Dennis Bennett." And Derek Brown looks at me and goes, "I know who the F you are." And I was like, "Really? Awesome. That feels great." It was pretty cool. Des was there, but people were all around him all the time. Lisa Ann was there, and she was interviewing people. There were lots of people there. Lots of cats from Sirius and the Better Sports Network team was there. It was, but to have somebody that's like, because Debro's not been added for like a long time. He's been in the business a while, but I've kind of watched him kind of make his way a little bit from afar. I've been in the industry for about 6 years now, and he's got a little bit of a name to him, and for him to say, "Yeah, I know who you are," that felt nice. I feel like as an editor, I spend a lot of time behind the scenes, and but that felt good.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's a great guy. Lots of fantastic folks. If you guys are out there and you have not been to the Fantasy Football Expo, highly encourage you to go next year. Stuff's going on all weekend, different drafts, different mixers. You can listen to panels, discuss stuff. The Dynasty panel that we get to help host. I'm a little biased, but I think it's one of the best panels out there as far as information and things like that. So Vic checking in tonight saying, "So glad I'm able to catch the show tonight. Love the job that you guys are doing." Thank you so much, Vic. Really appreciate that, man.
And speaking of the panel, I got to say, it was standing room, and that was while Des Bryant was speaking in another room. We had a packed house for the Dynasty panel.
We really did. It was definitely an honor because I thought, man, you guys put us at the same time spot as Des Bryant. Like, man, that's tough. And I mean, all the seats were taken. There are tons of people standing in the back just wanting to hear. And I don't think they were disappointed. There was lots of good discussion around how to build teams, how to make trades, all of that kind of stuff. So I thought that was pretty awesome. Peter saying that we're looking good tonight. So Peter's lying to us. See how he is, Dennis?
Well, that's his job. He's social media.
Yeah, he's got to make us look good. All right, Dennis. Well, lots of things going on in the NFL world right now. One of those things is some preseason action. We're seeing Austin Watkins resurrecting his career from the dead, which I'm thrilled about because I was a big fan of his rookie year. I actually had him as a top 10 receiver in that illustrious 2021 class. So very excited to see how he's performing tonight.
That's Sammy's little cousin, right?
No, but he is related to somebody, and I don't remember who, but he does have like some sort of NFL bloodline. I don't remember who it is. It's like an uncle or a cousin or something. I'll have to go back and figure it out because I remember hearing that back when I saw him at the Senior Bowl.
You know who else is resurrecting their NFL career tonight? Trey Sermon.
Is he doing well? I haven't got to see him play at all.
Off a 33-yard touchdown, caught a 14-yard pass, and apparently, if you believe the rumors, him and Rashad Penny are basically fighting for one spot. And Penny, last I looked, was 2 carries for 18 yards. So he was getting a little, he was doing what he was supposed to. Yeah. So, I mean, he's out of the game by now. Sermon, 5 carries, 54 yards and a touchdown, 1 catch and 14 yards.
Good for him. That's awesome.
Kennedy Brooks looked okay against the Browns' third stringers. So
I know Peter Bartowski, big Kennedy Brooks fan. I remember that. All right. Let's talk about some of the news and some of the things that have been happening here. We've seen 2 of the running backs that we've been kind of waiting on for a long time to figure out where they're going to end up. We've got 2 of the 4. So Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott have both signed. I think we have slightly different expectations for their values on these teams. But Dennis, what are your thoughts on these signings? What does it mean for the other players there? And what does it mean for them?
Well, I feel like with Zeke, his value is starting low and we expect it to stay low. I think he's going to be I don't even think he'll be a change of pace necessarily. He'll be a short yardage guy. The pictures of him haven't been flattering.
No.
I don't know if they've been enhanced. But he's looking like he's been dipping into the Captain Crunch. But at this stage of his career, if he rushes for 500 yards and 6 or 8 touchdowns, I think that's all you can expect. He's not going to have a great yards per carry or yards after contact. He's not going to be very efficient, but he's going to get you the tough yards. And while Ramondre has the size to do that, do you want to take your explosive back, and pound him into the line when you need 2 yards, when you got another back that can get you those 2 yards just as effectively? So while Ramondre's touches may go down a little bit, I don't think it's going to be significantly. I think he'll still be, the guy in the passing game. He'll get, I think, comfortably over 200 carries, but they want to keep him fresh. He wore down. And Zeke is a guy that at this point, looking to win a ring, be a team player, still play football. His contract isn't cumbersome to the Patriots. Dalvin, on the other hand, it seems like he may be hot coming out of the gate, and by the end of the year, their roles may flip-flop. I think Dalvin's gonna get the start. Maybe not. Maybe he won't start, but I feel like he's gonna get more work the first few weeks of the season, while Breece Hall kind of works his way back, gains confidence in his knee. News came out today or yesterday that Breece said, I'm feeling good, but I still get sore sometimes, and so they're giving him a little bit of extra time off. And we saw that last year with J.K. Dobbins. And it's easy to want Breece Hall, to come back like Adrian Peterson did, but realistically, I think we need to temper our expectations for Breece. I think they both could be top 30 running backs, maybe top 24 running backs. But I probably want Dalvin earlier in the season and Breece later in the season.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely Dalvin is the bigger impact for fantasy football purposes than Zeke is. And I'm with you. I don't think Zeke's going to do a ton. I think it'll be just enough to be a little bit annoying, because there'll probably be a couple goal line spots that he takes from Ramondre that, we wanted Ramondre to get in, and Zeke's there on the goal line. And, we might get frustrated and lose a couple touchdowns there. But overall, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on Ramondre Stevenson. Now, let's talk about the other 2 running backs that we've kind of been clumping together with these guys, Uncle Lenny and Kareem Hunt. Any thoughts on those guys? Any landing spots that you think fit? Edward Rouse says that he thinks Fournette is going to end up in Dallas.
I think that makes sense from a fit standpoint. I think the jury is out as to whether or not Pollard can hold up for a 300 touch season. He didn't get that kind of work in college, and I think having another back to take the load off is helpful to him. John Machota from The Athletic, in his most recent roster, left Malik Davis off the 53-man roster. Now, that doesn't mean he won't end up on the practice squad, but that does mean at this point that would make Rico Dowdell the backup, and then Deuce Vaughn the number 3. So I wouldn't be surprised if they start to sniff around Leonard Fournette, and it seems like it might be a fit. But I also think Lenny still fancies himself a starter. I think he's looking for some place he can go and kind of maybe force his way into a starting role. And I don't know that Dallas is that, unless he thinks he can completely take over the Zeke Elliott role, and they'll be happy to put Tony Pollard back into the 1B role.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where he goes. I still am surprised that we've not seen the Chargers ever go after one of these kind of backs to help with that between the tackle stuff that they don't want Austin Eckler doing as much. Keep trying to draft guys, and it just hasn't really panned out as well as they would have hoped. I'm surprised they haven't kick the tires on one of these types of guys that are a little bit older, but big physical backs to just take a little bit of wear and tear off of Austin Eckler. But we'll see how all of that plays out. Edward would actually be a good one to ask because he is a Chargers fan. What about Hunt? Do you think Hunt? I know he's gotten quite a few visits, both with the Saints and with the Colts. Do you think we end up seeing Hunt go to one of those two spots, or maybe even another destination?
Well, Kendre Miller was back at practice. So I think, he's going to be good to go for the start of the season. And we know Jamal Williams can carry the load if he has to be the feature back. I don't know that he can do it all season long as a 3-down back, but he won't have to because Kamara will come back. So he could, do 3-down work for the first 3 games and then slide back into the marking room role. Hunt it seems like Kareem Hunt may have a little better, a little bigger perception of what his value is than the NFL does.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I think the signing of Drake in Indianapolis, I think the only reason they would bring Hunt in is if this excused absence that Jonathan Taylor is on ends up being a little longer than they expected. I could see, Hunt went up and visited Minnesota, and in the first preseason game they played, Chandler looked pretty good. I think Madison's clearly the starter there, but I'm not sure he's going to take over the Dalvin Cook workload. And then Dwayne McBride, who, we all liked for his contact balance and his rushing ability, but, made a mistake in that first game and he got disappeared. So we'll have to see if in the second game he makes a comeback, gets himself back in the good graces and starts to earn more touches. So that would be an opportunity. And I think, too, at some point, Arizona is going to have to bring somebody in. They've got
that's
James
a good one,
Conner, who and Arizona is going to be terrible. You're not going there to win. So they're probably going to have to pay more for a back to go there. But as much as I like Connor this year, he has a history of playing hard and getting dinged up, missing 2-3 games. So it feels like that would be a great spot for Hunt because Hunt could fill that same role with Arizona that he did with Cleveland.
Yeah. Let's touch on some other news that, has surfaced recently. One of the big ones is Jameson Williams. We touched on it a little bit with Tom in the injury segment of all of this, but Jameson Williams, first round pick, former Ohio State and Alabama guy, missed a lot of time last year recovering from that ACL injury. Then everyone knows about the unfortunate gambling issue, which caused him to miss the first 6 games this year. Now we've got the hamstring that's kind of cropped up. Now, in some ways, this is the best time it could have happened for him because he's missing those first few games anyway. So he can take his time, get back healthy, but he is still missing reps in practice and in preseason games and things like that. So, Dennis, what do we do here with Jameson Williams?
I'm scared now. It feels like the maturity issues are starting to stack up on the injury issues, and it's driving his value down. Like, he does some things really, really well. And I drafted him as a great prospect in rookie drafts. I want to still believe, but I guess I just got to wait until week 7 and see what happens. I really would have liked for him to get as many reps as he could have possibly gotten in training camp, just so he could get comfortable with the offense and comfortable with Goff. And the coaches would know, hey, this guy knows where he's going and what he's supposed to be doing, not because he can tell us, but because we've seen him do it in practice and in preseason games. And we're not going to get that now. He's going to be out the rest of the preseason. Then he'll serve his 6-game suspension. And then they'll ease him back in. And 6 weeks is long enough for someone like Josh Reynolds or Denzel Mims, who doesn't seem to be doing terrific, or Marvin Jones, to kind of establish themselves opposite of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Or maybe Sam Laporta steps up and takes on a really prominent receiving role, or Jahmyr Gibbs for that matter. And it just pushes him down the pecking order for targets, and he has to start earning his way back. I mean, I'm okay. Like, I have a lot of leagues, and so taking a shot on him and rebuilding leagues to me makes sense, especially if you can get him cheap right now because he's injured again and he's suspended, and you can start talking up the maturity issues, and you can drive his price down.
Sure.
But he does some things. He's got really good hands. He's really fast. He's a good route runner.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if he had 15 more pounds on him, but it is what it is. We're seeing a lot of these slender guys. As down as I was on the small receivers in this class, a lot of them are showing out really well in training camp. So I'm still good trying to get him at a discount, but I'm not going to go overpay for him.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you there. Real quick, before we get into some of the other topics, I did see one other trade that came in real quick, and I want to touch on it because I feel like I knew the answer pretty quick, but I'm curious your thoughts on it. 12-team Superflex League, start 10. Brandon Ayuk, a 24 first and a 25 first for Chris Olave. For me, that's easily the Brandon Ayuk side. As much as I love Chris Olave, I think he's a great player. I think that there's a world where Ayuk's production and Olave's production aren't crazy off this year. But to give two firsts on top of that is just way too much. So I don't know what side, Max, that you're on, but I definitely want the Ayuk in the first side. Am I crazy? Am I seeing that incorrectly, or what do you think?
No, I'm pretty high on Ayuk, and well, there's what, like a 15 spot or something, 20 spot difference in their rankings. Like, I think Olave is like a top 12 wide receiver, and Ayuk is like just inside the top 30 or top 24.
Sure.
So there's a big gap between them, and I agree. I think of the two wide receivers in San Francisco, Ayuk is the better wide receiver, in my opinion. I don't know if that necessarily works great with what Brock Purdy is going to be doing and what that offense is going to be doing. I think he's going to get plenty of opportunity. I think he'll comfortably be over 100 targets, him and Debo both. And if I get 2 first-round picks on top of that, you see all my Ohio State stuff behind me. And so I love Chris Olave. But, yeah, I'm moving him for 2 firsts and Brandon Ayuk all day.
Yeah, absolutely. He said he did that trade already, and then he flipped Brandon Ayuk for another 25 first and 24 second. So sounds like my man is rebuilding, and he's getting tons and tons of picks and assets for that rebuild. So well done. Vic Chavez says Hunt is going to end up re-signing in Cleveland, isn't he? I think that the two sides are kind of over each other. Yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen. But eventually you get desperate and you just return to the old ex-girlfriend, I guess. I don't know.
So I got a trade for you.
All right.
So I made 2 trades in the same league today. So I'm defending champion, and I was going into this season. Dynasty Nerds, Dynasty GM has me at 6th best team in the league.
Okay.
Mostly because I'm a little bit weak at running back. I got some
Dynasty or contender mode.
Dynasty.
Okay.
And so I was sitting on, so my running backs, I got Miles Sanders, Isaiah Pacheco, Joe Mixon, and Aaron Jones.
Okay.
I drafted Tank Bigsby, got Kyron Williams, Kenneth Gainwell, Damian Harris. So I've got some depth pieces, but I don't have like that super stud. And then at wide receiver, I got Deebo Samuel, Gabe Davis, Deontay Johnson, Thielen, Adam Robinson, Michael Thomas, Van Jefferson, Chase Claypool. So I got Njoku and Mark Andrews at tight end, Burrow and Dak at quarterback. So at those two positions, I felt great, but I needed to upgrade. Well, I received a trade today. I would receive Chris Godwin, and I would give up. So let me find all the ones I rejected on that first one. I get Chris Godwin. I give up a 24-second Joshua Palmer and Devin Singletary.
Oh,
like that's a smash accept one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as nervous as I am about how Godwin may produce this year because he's got Baker and Trask, and I feel like Todd Bowles is going to focus a little bit on helping Mike Thomas get to his 1,000 yards. That felt like a slam dunk for me. The other one is like I went to the guy that was ranked 12th in our league, according to the Dynasty GM, and he had Najee Harris and Christian McCaffrey on his team. So I'm like, well, people are down on Najee. Let me see if I can get Najee. So I sent him an offer of a first-round pick I sent him Deebo Samuel for Najee Harris.
Okay.
I feel like they're fairly even, especially if people are down on Najee. Rejected. He sent back an offer with a bunch of picks, and kept trying to give me some fourth-round picks to get first-round picks from me. He didn't really want. At one point, it was two first. I would be giving up 2 first-round picks, Tank Bigsby, and a third-round pick. Now, the first would be in 25 and 26.
Okay.
So they were future first. And I would get McCaffrey and 2 future fourth-round picks. I just couldn't bring myself to take the fourth-round picks. I'm like, I don't want the fourth-round picks. Like, I get it. I get it. You think I'm an awesome drafter and I'm going to find the fourth-round gems. Maybe I don't believe in myself. I don't know. I didn't want fourth-round picks in 25 and 26. So we ended up settling on. I ended up with McCaffrey and the 2 fourth-round picks.
Okay.
But I gave up a 25 first, a 26 first, a 25 second, and a 26 third. So when he kind of moved out of 24 with some of the picks and moved way out, I'm like, you know what? If I can add Christian McCaffrey and Chris Godwin to this team, I think I can defend my title.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, especially at the wide receiver position, who did you say you had? Like you had Deontay
Samuel, Deontay Johnson, Gabe Davis. Now
so
I
really
have
the
Chris
only
Godwin, Mike Thomas.
Yeah, really the only guys you were counting on at the end of last year were Deontay and Deebo. So I'm shocked that you want to ship with those 2 guys as really your only reliable wide receivers.
Well, even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while.
Hey, but that just shows you're manager of the year.
Well, I was riding the tail. Honestly, it was Dak Burrow and Mark Andrews really anchoring me. And then, Miles Sanders had a great season.
Sure.
Aaron Jones did well. So I was able, honestly, the round before the championship game, the guy that probably would have beat me got knocked out.
Nice.
So I felt like, I'm in this, I go through cycles with trading, and, Peter can attest to, we're in a couple leagues together. Like, I'm not a trade junkie. I don't trade just to trade. I want to make my team better and be helpful to you so we can get a deal done. But I'm in, 20 leagues. I do 4 shows a week. I work a full-time job. I edit countless articles and publish countless articles and do rankings. So there's only so much time for me to put together deals.
Right.
But man, I think I nailed. I think I had a kick-ass day-to-day trade.
Yeah. Those were good.
Now, I don't have any first-round picks until 2027.
Who needs them? Who needs picks? All right. Well, let's get back into a couple other of the news and notes type items. The Joe Mixon verdict today was pretty big news because it looked like it was
for that last team I was just talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Pretty big news as far as being worried about what this is going to mean. Now, there are still some ramifications that the NFL could bring that didn't happen in the trial. So just because it was a not guilty verdict doesn't mean the NFL won't suspend him at all. But at least there's no legal ramifications weighing over his head. What are your thoughts on Joe Mixon? Does this offer maybe the buy window's probably gone now that he was found innocent. But what are your thoughts on this whole case?
I mean, the Dynasty community has been trying to write Joe Mixon off all off season, and he hasn't been right. To quote Geno Smith. So, and Cincinnati has said, look, you're our guy for better or worse. Now we're going to ask you to take a little bit of a pay cut to make this work because, we got to pay these wide receivers and this quarterback. So we want you here, but you're 27 years old now. You've been in the league a few years. You're not terribly efficient. We'll keep you on the field to do the things we need you to do. Now I feel like Mixon is set up to be a workhorse again this year. But I do think the Bengals are sort of evolving into a pass first team a la Kansas City. And I think in the AFC, with a defense like Cincinnati has, you have to be that pass first offense to put up a lot of points. They don't, Philadelphia can afford to run it more because they've got a much better defense, maybe the best defense in the NFC. But in the AFC, you got to score points. You got to put up a lot of points, and you're going to do that through the air, not necessarily on the ground as often. I think Mixon, until the Bengals tell us something different by bringing in a Kareem Hunt or a Leonard Fournette and plopping them on the roster, I think, you should be, if you're a contender, Mixon is a guy that I'm comfortable going out to get. And if I can get him and have him as my RB2, or get him, if I'm starting 3 running backs because I have to start one in the flex and I can put Mixon in that rotation. Is he going to have some dud games? Probably. But he also, as we saw, what was it last season? He had the 5 touchdown game.
Yeah.
The season before. So, he's still a good running back. He's got decent speed, decent in the passing game. I think, it's kind of borne out. He isn't quite Zeke Elliott in the passing game when it comes to picking up the blocks, or we wouldn't have seen quite as much Samaje Perine. But he's not bad at it. He's better than the guys behind him. So I like Mixon this year.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Do we think that there might be some suspension looming, a 2-game, a 3-game, something like that, or no?
I wish I had Rich's crystal balls because you just don't know with the NFL.
You don't.
I think they might wait until the other issue gets settled, where he allegedly provided a gun to somebody at his house that was fired at some kids like out in the street or something. Kids near the edge of his property or something. I don't think they fired, quote unquote, at them so much as they fired to scare them.
Sure.
But we don't know all the details there either. I think once that gets kind of settled, they may be more inclined to say, okay, we've got all these things. Now we're going to give you a couple games. But I also think that, I'm not expecting, 6 or 8 games if he does, 2 games, maybe 3 like Kamara.
Yeah, I think that's the worst case scenario. I think 3 games. I just don't see a scenario where it's past 3 games. So I'm guessing that's where kind of all of this will land when we're said and done. But it's definitely in the realm of possibility that he just gets off, or it gets pushed off like we saw Alvin Kamara's get pushed off for so long as well. It just gets pushed off to next year, and then they deal with it next year. It's you never know 100% what the NFL is going to do. So always a tough task to predict. Dennis, we've seen a lot of football these first few weeks, and we've seen a lot of exciting players, some guys that have risen in ranks, some guys that I don't think anybody's really fallen just through 1 week of preseason, 1.5 weeks. But is there anybody that's kind of caught your eye so far that you're like, ooh, I was in on them before, and now I'm totally in, or I wasn't in on them before, but that was interesting enough that I'm excited.
So when I make my custom shirts, they're going to be team big wide receiver. And I got to say, man, I like what Cedric Tillman is doing. Tillman has looked good.
Yes.
And, you know, I know Jalen Hyatt had a great year last year at Tennessee, but he didn't do, you know, he kind of didn't do what he did until Tillman got injured. You know, Tillman, Hyatt's first couple years there, he was, you know, caught like 300 yards each season. So I like what Tillman's doing. I think this year he's really battling with Donovan Peoples-Jones for the wide receiver 3 spot in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
And while we kind of have indications they're going to pass a little bit more, because they spent $250 million on Deshaun Watson. Right. They went out and got Elijah Moore. I don't know that the wide receiver 3 in Cleveland is necessarily going to be a consistently viable fantasy asset. But next year, you know, it kind of the writing on the wall looks like they'll be moving on from Amari Cooper. And, you know, back in the old days, like, you know, 2014, you know, we always waited for that second or third year wide receiver breakout. And so, you know, if Tillman puts up 500 yards this year and then Cooper goes on, Tillman steps into that role in 2024, we could see Tillman putting up 1,100 yards.
Yeah.
So I like what he's doing. He's putting in the work. He's developing the rapport with Deshaun Watson. You know, I haven't watched a lot of Michael Mayer, and you know, there's that conundrum where you want to see your players on the field, but tight ends, if they get stuck blocking, they can become, you know, not terribly efficient for fantasy. But I feel like if they can get decent quarterback play out of their quarterbacks in Arizona, Las Vegas, then Mayer may be able to step up and, you know, be a top 15 tight end. You know, that's not, you know, it's not gangbusters for a tight end, but for a rookie tight end, I think if he can finish top 15 while he's quote unquote learning how to be an NFL tight end, he has the size to be out there all 3 downs, which theoretically, because he is athletic enough, you know, he's not a Dalton Kincaid or a Travis Kelce athlete, but he's athletic enough. He's, you know, he's not, you know, one of these slow lumbering tight ends. But I wouldn't mind, you know, maybe late season sneaking in and grabbing a piece of Michael Mayer, because, you know, I've been reluctant to draft tight ends. That's my latest kick.
Right.
So, you know,
that was
he's a guy
I was going to bring up after you're done talking.
He's a guy. Well, you know, he's a guy I kind of got my eye on to watch and see, you know, what's going to happen. Will he develop? He was, I think, you know, going into the 2022 college football season, I think Mayer was kind of regarded as the tight end 1 in last year's rookie class. And then as some of these other athletic tight ends kind of burst onto the scene and had some great years, and Mayer just kind of plateaued, you know, he got passed over by the Dalton Kincaids and you know, the Will Musgraves and whatnot. So that's really that's, you know, from the tight end position. And honestly, one more guy, and it's going to sound like such homerism, but man, I almost am like watching Dorian Thompson-Robinson, like, and going, man, I don't know that I'm worried if Deshaun Watson gets injured. This guy's just going out there and balling. He's like, let's do it. You know,
yeah, he's looked good. It's, you know, obviously it's against lower competition, and so it's tough to know, like, okay, if we got the number 1 defensive backs out there, if we got the real pass rush out there, but at the same time, it's our number 2s out there with him, you know, so he's not getting the best of our players either to, you know, be his support cast. So yeah, it is interesting. And I've been waxing poetic about Austin Watkins because I've loved him for a long time, and I didn't even know if he was ever going to get another shot. And man, has he gotten a shot, and he has absolutely made the most of this opportunity that he's been given. I haven't seen if he got any more catches or yards tonight, but 6 for like 124 and a touchdown or something like that was last I saw. Just having a monster game.
Yeah, you know who's making a little bit of noise is also Calvin Watkins over in Pittsburgh.
Oh, Austin, Calvin Austin,
Calvin Austin's Watkins that they're running together. Yeah, Calvin Austin. You know, he caught that 67-yard touchdown pass last week, and it wasn't a bubble screen. You know, it was an actual route down the field.
Right.
You know, I think you know, he's battling Allen Robinson for that wide receiver 3 role there in Pittsburgh. I don't know how viable he'll be this year. You know, we're kind of expecting Kenny Pickett to take a step. We'll see how big a step he takes, but he's got Deontay Johnson and George Pickens there to kind of move the ball. If Austin can get consistent playing time, he may be able to do something with it. And you know, with that speed on the outside, he might not get pigeonholed into the slot.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Dennis, that is about all we got for tonight, my man. It is we're getting closer and closer to the start of that regular season. We are now into week 2 of 3 of the preseason. In some ways, week 3 of 4, because we had that unofficial first week there with the Hall of Fame game. Dennis, what else you got going on before the season starts? Lay it on me, man.
So over on the Fantasy Football Roundtable, we just dropped our top 25 quarterback redraft rankings on Monday. You can find that on your favorite podcast platform. Friday, we'll be dropping our top 25 tight ends. Well, we may only do 20 tight ends. I mean, it's tight ends. Next week, we'll be doing running backs, top 50. And then the week after that, we'll be doing wide receivers. And these are redraft PPR rankings that we're doing over at the Fantasy Football Roundtable. I'm here. Peter and I are kind of working out how we want to get the trade show rescheduled. We've had some changes in our lives, and so we're trying to get that going. And then you can find me at culture_coach on the X machine.
Yeah, I'm never going to get used to calling it that. Real quick, I'm going to try to sneak it in. Kobe said, would you trade Dubs for a in a super flex for a 10? I'm trying to read too fast. In a 10-team league for a 2024 second. Right now, 24 second, wouldn't mind getting that, but I do like Dubs. So I think it's a pretty even deal. It depends on how much you believe in him, but I would probably play it safe and take the second at this point. Dennis?
I think, I don't know that it's playing it safe, because that second round pick it's unknown where it is and whether or not who it is will work out. But I like Dubs. So to me, it's, do you need somebody to play this year, or, you know, because Dubs was a second round pick.
Yeah. All right. Well, you can find me on X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it. You can find me there at Dynasty Price. We will be back next week. We are inching closer and closer to the season. For Dennis, for Heavy T, for me, we'll see you next week.